Hello again, and welcome everybody this evening to another exciting edition of Victory Never Sleeps. We are continuing our series on the 10 Noble Virtues, and today we are going to talk about truth. Um, Inside baseball, we have kind of a side discussion amongst leadership of who people think best embodies these virtues amongst our leaders to have on for these discussions. And overwhelmingly, his peers chose Witan Clifford Erickson to represent truth. And I certainly concur with that. Cliff always brings the honesty. You can always count on that. Whether you want it or you don't want it, the honesty is there and much appreciated. Welcome, Cliff. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate my peers, recognizing me as being truthful, I guess. I kind of just hope it's people's default, but it's an honor for them to have nominated me. So thanks, everybody.
That's one of those things, and I think, like common sense, it's not really that common anymore. I've said this a lot of the time, but the right thing is not always. Actually, it is seldom the easy thing, and people have learned it is much easier to, if not straight up lie, then certainly to be less than truthful. And that's kind of a defining thing that we're trying to fix in the Asatru Folk Assembly. I'm trying to think any top of the program notes to talk to you guys about. Anybody who is within reasonable possible getting there distance, we've got Feast of the Einherjar in Oklahoma tomorrow through Sunday. I'm going to be flying out for that early in the morning. And anybody who is interested, reach out over in the side chat. We can get you connected with your local folk builder. There is still time to show up and be part of that if you're able to. Other stuff, this is going to be our second week on a couple of new platforms. We are simulcasting on VK and Odyssey this week, as well as Twitter, Entropy, and here where I assume most of you are listening to me on YouTube. So anybody who wants to participate tonight in any super chats to get your question up at the top, please go over to Entropy, and we appreciate that. Anybody that just wants to throw us a tip here or there or contribute, we always appreciate that, and you can do that on Entropy as well. Something to note that we are kind of in the midst of, we are trying to buy the land for Sigerheim. We are very close in that process. We're getting down to the wire on some things, and we certainly need all the help we can get as far as generosity for donations to get that down payment in. We have been trying now for a little bit over a week, and we've got about 10% of that down payment raised as far as contributions from you guys go. So we really appreciate it. And if you want to help out, Nick threw the link up. And as you guys get questions this evening, please go ahead and throw them over into the side. We promise we will get to those and make sure your question gets answered. And Cliff, tell us what truth means to you.
What does truth mean to me? Well, as I mentioned, I kind of assume it's the default, but I suppose it's not. Truth is, I guess there's honesty and then there's truth, right? Honesty is telling the truth, and that's a lot easier to define. It's not lying, not manipulating people through subterfuge anyway, encouraging people, that's fine. But truth itself, it's what is and is not changeable. We can use our will to shape the world, but truth is all of that we either cannot change, or it's the way things are now. the sky is blue is a truth, right? It's not true everywhere, and maybe not here forever, but the sky is blue is obviously a true statement on Earth in Midgard. Gosh, I guess I should have thought of that more before I came on, but it's, you know, the unchangeable facts or laws or essence of nature or being.
Well, you know, I'm picking up on some of the side chat over here, and one of the things that's interesting is truth is so fundamental. It's hard to, when you try to get to etymology and you try to get to definitions, you have to use language to describe those words. And there's certain core values that don't really, it's hard to imagine a root from them or something that predates them to define them. Truth is perhaps the most basic element of, as somebody put in the side, of conforming to reality. One thing that I think is very fundamental about, as far as the value of truth, is, especially in today's world where there's such a high social value on not offending and on not triggering anybody, if you don't have an honest assessment of where you are and how reality is, you can't ever begin to make that more to your liking. You can't change your circumstances or change yourself unless you have an accurate gauge of where you currently are and, you know, where you want to go. And so I think it's fundamental. And I like that it's, you know, early on in our list of virtues is it's necessary to proceed from a place of truth. And the other thing that our ancestors certainly valued about truth, and we still value today, and it's one of the reasons that I value my friendship with you, Cliff, so much, is it's hard to have a relationship that's meaningful if there's not truth exchanged. I've seen this in just in my life growing up. My mom she's always been one of those people that smiles and nods and says everything's fine. And her relationships with people is always very, very surface level, because she learned the skill of fundamentally basing everything on niceties and white lies. And I don't say that in any way to be insulting of my mother. There's a generation of people that's just the way you do things, is tell people what they want to hear, and you don't air any kind of dirty laundry, and you don't, you behave a certain way that's on the surface. And I've watched it really limit the deep friendships and deep relationships that she had in her life. And it's kind of a important lesson I learned that way. True frith and beyond that friendship is based so much on being able to count on getting honest information and honest feedback, be it verbal or emotional, from the people that you interact with. So I have a question come up from Nick. Is there an esoteric aspect to truth? Cliff, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think so, yes. I actually, while Matt was talking for a minute there, I wasn't really satisfied with, my definition of truth. And so I went and I Wiktionaried it, because Wiktionary is, the true facts of the universe, right? And the word truth comes from Proto-Indo-European, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Dru, which means tree, which comes from Deru, which means firm or solid. So it actually is a lot closer to what I was saying than I guess I gave myself credit for. It's the hard facts, the concrete matter of things. And it's interesting that you asked the question about the esoteric meaning of truth just after I looked that up, because, we have Yggdrasil, the world tree, and it's what the 9 worlds are structured on, what they're hanging on, I think is how it's put. And the worlds, they exist in reality is one way to interpret that. If the word truth actually, comes from tree, from our ancestors' understanding of the universe, and it's not just our people that have this concept of a world tree, of, the axis mundi. It's fundamental to, I think all peoples in the Northern Hemisphere, actually. It's something that's so fundamentally, I'm going to say true. You're not supposed to use the word that you're trying to talk about when you're describing it, but it's tough to do with this one. But it's fundamental to everything that we can observe. And I think that a lot of our people's understanding of spirituality comes from observing the stars, from observing the trees, from observing animals, and just the way that the world works. Scientific observation doesn't make the gods. It's not like we created them because some people say that, but it's not that we created Thor because we needed a way to explain thunder. It's the other way around, that we started to understand Thor because we could see Thor in the world through thunder and lightning. But yeah, I think there's an esoteric part to truth. It's almost an upside down question, I guess. Isn't esotericism all about getting to truth? Almost that's the tool to find what is true and to best understand the world, both natural and supernatural, as fully as one can.
It's one of the things with esoterics is there's useful esoterics, and then there is masturbatory escapism esoterics. And, I often define that as basement wizardry often, but very seriously amongst our people, one is based on truth. One is based on better understanding the universe, better understanding your place in it, and then working with that, whether you like the answers you get or not. And the other is quite literally, spending your time in the land of make-believe, deluding yourself with, fluffy words that make you feel powerful when you in fact aren't. So I think it's kind of an important definer in esoterics. One of the things, and we see this all around us, to go with the tree analogy or the tree relationship. When we see the generation of people that we're watching come up now that aren't based in truth, but are based in wishful thinking and don't know what gender they are, and, disabilities aren't really disabilities, they're just different abilities, and all these things that are fundamentally untrue, these people are quite literally rootless. They don't have those solid things to hearken to or to come back to. I noticed that way back when I used to work with emotionally disturbed children, and you'd watch all of the participation trophies and the feel-good things that aren't really based on true things and on values. You can shatter illusions in an instant, but you can't shatter truth. I watched, and anytime those kids were awarded some illegitimate thing, it did very, very little for them. It may make them feel good at a moment, but I watched those kids go through terrible things in their life. And if they could claim to one true victory they had over something, or one thing they actually won by merit and by truth, they hold on to that in the darkest times. And no matter what life throws at them, they can't take away the fact that, on September 30th, 2003 in second grade, spelling bee, you won. that doesn't go away no matter what else happens. That's a fact. And you can rely on fact. You can hold on to it. I think from an esoteric standpoint, one of the things that I've found particularly valuable, and I think that some of you guys watching may be familiar with this, but the 9 Doors of Midgard by Dr. Stephen Flowers, that's a really interesting curriculum. But one of the first things that they have you do is create a list of your positive characteristics and the negative things about yourself, and to be brutally honest. And the value of this list is in that honesty, or in that truth. And if you're honest with yourself about your negatives and you go back and reevaluate it, it doesn't sound esoteric, but it's the foundation that you build your esoterics upon. That has been meaningful to me. And I still go back and look at that list from time to time that I started many years ago, and see, what progress I've made on those negative things about myself. So being honest and truthful with yourself is, I don't think in and of itself it's esoteric, but it is the foundation to which every meaningful esoteric is built upon. We have a question. Have you read Dr. Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life? He has a chapter called Tell the Truth, or at least Don't Lie. I have not. Cliff, have you read that?
I have not, but I agree with the subject, the title of the chapter. Life gets complicated when you start having to maintain lies. I mean, I've told lies before. I was a kid, I was a teenager, and there's this sense of dread constantly when you have stuff out there that's not real, that's not truthful. It's just for me at least, telling the truth and being truthful is, most of the time, not always, there's always exceptions, but it's actually easier in the long run. Like in the moment, saying what people want to hear might be easier, but on the whole, absolutely not. It's a lot of work to maintain an alternate reality.
No, I absolutely. That's one of the, it's one of the things that I've also said on this program about trying to structure your life in a way that everything's congruent. If you're wearing different masks and you've got to pretend to be a different person around each of these different audiences, the more you've got to juggle those things, the more you've got to maintain illusions, the harder, and like Cliff said, the more stressful things are in the long run. I've watched, and telling the truth is like vomiting in a way. And hear me out on this. So it's going to get out there anyway, and you can spend a lot of time making yourself uncomfortable trying to hold back from telling the truth on it. But once you finally do it, then it's done, and then you can relax and it's over with.
Brush your teeth.
There you go. But yeah, I think that's really important. And also the title of that chapter in Dr. Peterson's book, and I have no idea if this correlates to the information in it, but there's fundamental honesty that you can be dishonest and not technically tell a lie. And I think the truth that we value in this virtue context is the idea of being truthful, not so much as the legalistic point of if you in fact told somebody a lie or not, because misleading is dishonest as well. And I think that's kind of an interesting nuance to this discussion.
Yeah, you don't have to tell the whole truth all the time. There's plenty of circumstances where that would be inappropriate. We have to do this in AFA leadership to maintain, confidentiality and confidences when members come to us with problems, and maybe somebody asks us about it and we say it's taken care of. That's not the whole story, of course, but that's as much as somebody might need to know. Or even just organizational details that would be inappropriate if they're out there, like having a surprise party for someone, right? The full truth is not the best way to implement a surprise party. So.
Yeah, well, That's you raise another point there too. I think oftentimes people feel compelled to lie because they don't realize they have the option of just not answering people, you know. None of your business is an appropriate answer. I'm not
Not a
going to
lie.
tell you is an appropriate answer. I would appreciate all of those answers better than somebody lying to me just to get me to leave them alone. And I think we often do that. And this kind of, there's themes in some of these shows, but Alan pointed this out with the idea of speaking intentionally. Very often we get in this habit of seemingly inconsequential untruth because it's just easier, or we perceive it's just easier that way in the flow of conversation. It's worth those extra few seconds to think about it and be like, you know what? That information is private. Like Cliff said with the confidentiality, you know, I don't have to lie to still not break confidentiality. I can straight up say, hey, I can't tell you that, or I'm not going to tell you that, or any other thing. And I think something else to bring up that's also very relevant is um, you don't have to be rude. Like there's ways to deliver truth that's kind, and you can pad truth not with dishonesty but with politeness. There's ways to do it. I think sometimes people fear that if they're honest it's going to necessarily be rude, and I think there are artful ways around that. Daniel asks, Witan Cliff, would you agree that honesty isn't synonymous with truth?
Yes. Honesty is telling the truth, but the truth itself is a deeper concept, like we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think honesty is expressing truth, whereas truth exists in general. Honesty is the display of truth, be it verbal or otherwise.
Yeah, if there were no humans, there would still be truth. The truth might be there are no humans, but there would be no honesty if there were no creatures to communicate about it.
Got another question here. What do you think when someone says my truth? It seems to me like they are saying it has nothing to do with actual reality. What are your reactions to that, Cliff?
I agree completely that they are intentionally detaching themselves from actual reality. They are, you know, they're all bubble boys. I mean, they have their own little world, and they, when they say my truth, they are essentially saying that they get to create their own laws of nature, and some of them may not be a very big deal. Some of them may be a huge deal that's going to cause lots of problems for the people around them if, they're expected to cater to these personal truths. Context matters, I suppose. Somebody could say my truth in a context where it isn't quite as negative as I'm taking it. But these days, the way that people use it out there, I think it's largely them excusing themselves from the actual truth.
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts on it. I think that it's one of those things that maybe originally didn't have such a negative meaning and has become completely developed of one. Now, whenever somebody says that, it seems to be a preface to them telling you something that's not true. Like, let me tell you my truth. And then some woke nonsense that doesn't conform to any kind of reality. I think that I've heard the term used before in saying what you believe to be true, even against popular opinion or popular perception, as if on a like testifying about something, to go, tell your truth, meaning maybe express something that is true to you as far as a subjective experience goes. But yeah, in general, I think that when somebody specifies that it's their truth as opposed to other people's truth, it's probably because it's not truth at all. We've got a super duper chat from Corey Proudfoot for $10. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. When we fail to speak hard truths, we keep others in denial. When we lie, we force others into delusion. I think there is truth in that comment, Corey.
Sounds right to me.
Something else I noticed over in the apparently that is a quote from Dr. Peterson. And I tend to agree with that, certainly. Over on the side, we've got somebody quoting the Have 'em All for us, and I think this raises an interesting thing for us to talk about. An honorable friend deserves truth, but a false friend has forfeited all right to it, and thus deception may be repaid with lies, if necessary, to avoid ruin, as stated in the Have 'em All. So I think that's a Have 'em All paraphrase there, but certainly that is what the Have 'em All says in the fundamentals. And I think that's an important nuance. Because these things are our core values doesn't mean they're not things that we're capable of acting differently with if there's purpose or there's intent. But it does mean it should be our default setting. And I certainly think it means it's what we owe to other noble people who are acting nobly. But yeah, you're correct. And by extension, the Allfather is correct by advising that, folks that treat you dishonestly are not entitled to being treated honestly by you. And certainly there's tactics and context involved. Just another Cliffism. Cliff is always the guy that makes the point in any of our internal discussions about how context is everything in some of these things. And I think that the context matters there specifically. What are your thoughts about it, Cliff?
I think the use in that translation of the Havamal stanza there, if it was sticking to the way we framed honesty and truth in our conversation here, it may have used the word honesty more than truth, because if we're holding up truth as unchanging and eternal, then what that stanza is talking about is really honesty. It is not amoral to use deception on a battlefield or in politics or something like that. Those are things that you should be doing because they're in your best interest and the best interest of your people, your tribe, your family, your unit, whatever the group that you are devoted to and responsible for. So in a way, lying to your enemy is truthful. I think that's what you're supposed to do. Because, it's like when you get these, IRS scam calls, you should not tell them your social security number, and that doesn't make you a bad person. Right. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that most of the time when we're talking about these values, and some of them don't have a social component, they all can be applied socially, but this one has kind of I suppose it comes with the conflating of truth and honesty, because I do think the two are very intimately related and worth talking about in the same breath. But truth exists regardless of social circumstance. Honesty is a characteristic informed by truth that is of value in the standard when dealing with noble people who are, that's the default when dealing with people that you have no enmity with. But yeah, and tactically, there's a lot of deception to where, there's levels of deception depending on the person that you're dealing with. But a fundamental of all of that, like Cliff said, is the more you maintain truth regularly and the less deception you have to manage, the better, because it once you say it, it's all something you have to keep track of and manage if it's not fundamentally true. We also have another super chat from Joe Manning with 41 US dollars. Thank you so much for that, Joe. We appreciate it. As a side note, the down payment on Sigerheim, if every AFA member donated $41, we would have that in the bag right now. So I appreciate that, Joe, and thanks for doing your part. He says, in light of the Have 'em all quote, have either of you had an experience where you had difficulty reconciling honesty with either tactics or kindness? Cliff, I'm going to let you go first on that.
I believe the answer is yes. I'm trying to think of a specific instance. I mean, certainly people have to do that. The short answer is yes. I'll think and see if I can come up with a more detailed example, but I think, of course, we all have.
Well, thanks, Cliff. I fed you the question so that I would have time to think about my answer.
Yeah,
I was spoiled. Yeah. So, and I don't want to shortchange your question. I'll absolutely give you a good answer as it occurs to me. But on the top, and I suppose this is a good thing for a number, for quite a few years now. I have tried very hard to be truthful and to get out of the habit of being tempted to be dishonest out of convenience or out of things like that. I can't think of tactically times, I'm trying to think because I want to answer your question. And certainly there have been times that have been difficult to reconcile, certainly with tactics and with kindness. And I'm also certain there's times where I've lied for both of those reasons in the course of my life. Tactically, I have let people, so early on with AFA stuff, I suppose this is a small one and I don't feel bad about it, but just as a note, I've let people believe things that aren't necessarily true. Like it always entertained me early on, and we've certainly grown since then. But when our member number was very much smaller, people would ask me, how many members are in the AFA? And, lately I've gotten very frank with just saying out loud. Right now, we've got 932 members. But at the time, I'd respond by, well, how many members do you think are in the AFA? And they would tell me like tens of thousands and, these spectacular numbers. And I would kind of nod and move on. And it wasn't really dishonest, but I would certainly let them continue thinking that we were more successful than we were. I think that's a really small thing. I certainly don't feel bad about that, but I that's just the quickest tactical dishonesty, I think, that I can think of right now. Out of kindness, I'm sure that I have, and I'm not trying to skirt the question, but something I've always really valued about myself in my friendships in my life, I've tried really hard throughout my adult life to be honest when people ask my opinion and never just tell them what they want to hear, specifically so that they knew they could trust my opinion. Because I value that in others, and I really want people to have that in me. Like when they ask my opinion, I'm going to tell them, and it may make my negative commentary not make them feel good, but it means they can take my compliments to the bank and they can trust that when I say they're doing something well, that I really mean it. and I even do this with children or whatever. I try not to overly flatter something to where if I say something is done well, that it really means that. Because again, I think that you can put trust in that and it puts your mind at ease if you can believe the advice you're getting. But if you have a friend that just wants to tell you what you want to hear, it may be nice, but it doesn't give you peace of mind and it doesn't help you sleep at night. But I promise as this conversation goes on, if I think of other instances, I'll put those out there for you.
I've thought of a few types of things. They're not, I can't identify them as like specific instances, more like scenarios that I know I've been in. So I don't know if this applies to the tactically part of the question per se. And this one's kind of more of a fun answer, but I mean, I've bluffed in poker, and that's expected. That's part of the rules of the game, right? But that's a dishonesty that's there that is, on purpose and expected. As far as, having to tell truths or to be honest and, in situations that are difficult, I have, there's a couple things. I have, let people fail at things because it's better for them to learn things the hard way. This is true professionally. This is true when raising children. This is true, with AFA leadership. Sometimes I'll see a mistake in progress and maybe just let it play out because a lecture as opposed to real experience is just never as good. I think everyone has been in the situation where you have to break up with someone that you're in a relationship with and they haven't done anything wrong. It's, literally the cliche, it's not you, it's me, where you are just not wanting to continue that. And, you have to hurt them to do what's best for everybody involved. So that, is something that I think most people can relate to. And specifically relating to Asatru, I have had to speak to a few people that wanted to be members who were not suitable for membership, and to tell them the reasons for that and to get them in a direction that's going to be more healthy for them. But knowing that, I'm saying no, that's not something they want to hear. And, to try to be helpful with that, but also with the, the expectation of they may just not like what I'm saying.
So Tyler, appreciate you, just donated $10. Thank you so much, Tyler. And he says, very fitting topic for the end of an election cycle. Looking forward to catching the whole show tomorrow. Hail. A random time for a side note, I guess. Folks that want to listen to this at a different time, certainly you can watch the video at various times, but also on Spotify, this is put out as a podcast on every Friday. So if you're interested in listening on Fridays, we have these up as podcasts. I was thinking of another one tactically, Joe. So in my career bouncing, I have tactically altered perception when dealing with folks. Just putting this out there, sometimes, especially when things are on camera, the crowd hears what you say more than they observe what happens. So if you're in an altercation with somebody, whether you want to be in the altercation or not, sometimes it's tactically sound to very loudly on camera and in front of the crowd say, sir, please stop fighting. Sir, stop fighting me. Sir, please stop resisting me. I don't want to fight you. Because that looks really good if anything happens down the road. But sometimes you may actually want to be involved in the altercation and may be more active participant in it than you want to admit. That may or may not have been a scenario that I know something about sometimes, allegedly. So we've got a three-parter here, and I'm going to try to read this without butchering it because there's a lot of things to it. Can truth be determined? And this is from Danny. Can truth be determined from pure reason, or is reliance on pure reason unreasonable and illogical without a metaphysical underpinning? Since we cannot test philosophical truths without accepting that things can be true in nature, yet entirely understandable by nature, philosophical truths cannot be tested as can material ones in a lab. It seems to me that reliance on a materialistic worldview does not comport to the idea of philosophical truths could exist, let alone be knowable. There's a lot there, and I want us to try to respond to that as best as we can, but we may need to refer back to the question to do that. Cliff, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they have whole college courses about that question. I think I guess the answer is yes. I mean, there are truths that you cannot prove directly anyway. So it's correct that that rational reasoning or that scientific methods may not be able to verify some truths. It may be worth the attempt, though, because we probably don't know which ones those are until actually going through the process. I mean, this is a question where we could go to Plato, or we could go to discrete mathematics and start drawing truth tables, and there's just a lot in that question. I think if you're asking, can we determine if the existence of the gods is true, we can observe evidences of that. We know that they're true because we see things in our lives and in the world that indicate that yes, they exist. But I don't think you're going to get a scientifically vetted and republished paper proving the existence of something metaphysical or spiritual.
So, as a question to ponder, I think that it's a valuable exercise. But like so much with Asatru that perhaps is frustrating, but in the spirit of truth is worth mentioning, there's a lot of gray area to things. And I think that an attempt at honesty is valuable, even if every particular of it doesn't happen to bear out factually. If the intention is truthful, we do ourselves a disservice acting as though, because we can't prove everything to be 100% true, that then nothing is true. There's certainly things that are true and that aren't, even if they're 85% true versus 15% not true. We letting perfect be the enemy of good in that is stifling, and I think prevents us from being virtuous people in a way. Like there's schools of philosophy that is existence real, or are we living in somebody else's matrix, or somebody else's imagination? Is existence relevant to the individual perceiving? All of these questions are really interesting to think about sometimes, but I think that too often they become a dodge towards living honestly. There's things that are true that we all know are true, and to act as though they're not because we can't empirically prove them beyond any possible shadow of any doubt on a quantum level misses the, you know, forgive the overuse here, but it misses the truth of the equation. And I say this about our lore, and this brings it back to metaphysics. Um, our lore is not literally true all the time, but our lore is metaphysically true. So often, truth is described in analogy or in colorful story form that is not meant to be literally true, but expresses truth. And I think that here on things that materially are impossible to prove 100%, I still think that you can approach truth without, without defining it to the nanomolecule. I think things are still generally true or not true. And I'm not sure if that's the meat of the question, but I think it gets towards it. And again, we want to strive for perfection, but I think that we do ourselves a disservice letting perfect be the enemy of good. You go with the best thing you have at your disposal. Some of this, it occurs to me with your question, involves things that are like issues of belief. Whether we believe in material reality or not, I think that most of us know material reality exists and it's a thing and it's real. But when we talk about a person's faith, that is a situation where I think that my truth may have an application, because I can say on a polygraph with 1,000% honesty that Odin has interacted with me, and I mean that 100% true, but other people listening, it does not conform to their understanding of what they know to be true. And same in the inverse with things. So I think that's a gray area that perhaps does touch on what you're talking about and on the previous question in a different way.
I think it's fun that you mentioned, or at least hinted at, simulation theory. Because I've always taken issue with simulation theory because I don't think it matters. It's like the most bogus question that I can imagine. Because if you prove that we're all in a simulation, right, then what's the point in that? Is it a way to find an excuse to commit heinous crimes without consequence? Except that in the simulation, there will be consequences. So it's still reality. I've always had a problem with simulation theory because it seems like it's an excuse to not have to, like, literally a way to create my truth or to excuse oneself from reality, except that it in no practical way actually does that.
Yeah, I think that that's one of those things that when I read esoteric books and they venture into it, I start eye rolling and taking issue with, because I think it skips the point. If your navel gazing prevents you from acting in reality, then it loses a lot of value. I've known I've known a number of people that have wasted vast quantities, if not the entirety of their life, pondering truth and refusing to act until they had absolute certainty of truth. And so they end up not doing anything. I think you've got to conform to what's the truest you can understand. And by all means, if your understanding of the truth evolves over time, then move, trend towards the more truthful. But you gotta pick something and go with it. And I think there's a tremendous value in that. And as far as truth plays into what I just said, it's important to be honest with ourselves on things that we don't know. If we think something's mostly correct, to still maintain in our mind the openness of reevaluating it for truth, I think that honors our virtue that we speak about, and also is a very useful skill for us to have. And it's hard for a lot of people. I know it takes practice to have that. Next question is from Travis. Is it okay to lie to save someone's feelings. Cliff?
I don't think so. No. If the wife asks me if she looks fat in something, I'm gonna tell her in a positive, constructive way what the truth of the matter is. I don't because what are you sparing their feelings for or from? I mean, the specific situation might dictate different courses of action, but I don't think that lying is going to actually make it better. You're either depriving them of a learning experience, or you're setting them up for more hurt feelings somewhere down the line. Like, if my kid's goldfish dies, I'm not going to tell him that, down the toilet he swims to, like, a big happy ocean. I'm going to take the opportunity to explain mortality. And I think that's the way to go. So no, I don't think so.
Is it okay? I mean, it certainly is understandable, and I understand the impulse to it. And I think as far as the hierarchy of horribly evil things you can do, saying something nice to spare somebody's feelings that's untrue is probably pretty low on that list. But I agree with Cliff, and I think that here's where the art comes in. There's ways to tell people truth that are kind and that are uplifting. He mentioned the common, hey, do I look fat in this dress thing that I think that all of us men have been in similar, if not the exact situation about that. I'll always answer that honestly, whether anybody wants to hear it or not, because in my experience, a woman would much rather hear that from someone they trust so that they're not embarrassed later on. I know that I would. If I looked ridiculous in something, I really hope that Mandy tells me to fix it instead of me going out in front of people thinking I look like $1 million and getting laughed at. Because the moment I realized that everybody was laughing at me because I looked like a fool, that would be much more crushing than, hey, Matt, I think I'd go with, a little bit, you need some pants that are bigger, or hey, I'd go with something different. Honesty helps there. And the specific, so I appreciate, he followed this up with a specific scenario. He said, what if they were dying and a lie would bring them comfort? And something this I suppose can be argued, but something that I think is fundamental, we have a certain instinct towards truth or not. And there's a value that I get when I know someone's telling me the truth that I don't get when I feel like somebody's telling me something that's false. Again, is it okay? I certainly get the impulse, but I would rather tell that dying person something truthful, but also give them truthful encouragement. And you can always find something positive to say that's true. Sometimes it may be more challenging than others, but you can say, well, unfortunately, no, but, and then tell them something that is truthful and they can hold on to and have. And I would say this, I would much rather go out with my friend telling me something honest than feeling like my friend lied to me on my deathbed.
I have some friends that are EMTs, and something that they shared with me across the board at different times. This is just something that I think is true among people in, medical or emergency services. Is like, if you have somebody in the back of your ambulance and they're like, am I going to make it? You don't just say yes if they're not going to. You say something positive, but you don't just, everything's going to be fine. Don't mind, the catastrophic injury, because they already know the answer, I think.
Secondly, don't rob somebody in your scenario. And again, context is everything, and it can be a million different ways. But telling somebody they're going to make it instead of, no, you're dying.
Yeah.
You're robbing them of the chance to make peace with things, or to bear that themselves in a dignified way. They're not getting that option if they don't know the truth. If they don't know the truth, they can't act upon it. This is assuming they have some time to act. Again, it all depends on the circumstance, but I still think as a kindness to someone you care about, it is more kind to be honest than to treat them dishonestly in an attempt to spare their feelings.
Yeah, I think they said they would say something along the lines of like we're on our way to the best care, or something true, but that's not like, a guarantee for something they really can't guarantee.
Well, here's another thing that people may want to be cautious about too when we talk about truth. Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. I think that's another one. When you ask somebody for truth, you can't be mad when they give you truth. I remember
Do it
that
all the time, though.
well, as an afterthought, I had my spleen removed in 2001. And it was my first big major surgery. And they were about to put me under to take my spleen out. And I asked, like, what are the odds that I don't wake up from this? And they're like, about 16%. Boom. And then they put the, yeah. And I didn't really want to hear that. That's higher odds than I wanted of not making it out of it. And, fortunately I was in the 84% that do make it, but that was would have been better if I didn't ask the question. We have over in the side chat that the genes do not make someone fat. It's the fat that makes them look fat. And I think that also tends to be a truth. But yeah, so, and I think this is a fun conversation tonight. And I think it veers in some places that our conversations on here don't always go. Another question: what makes one not suitable for membership?
Many things.
Well, yeah, I was going to say this isn't everything that I say here is not exhaustive, because there's countless things that at some time we may decide isn't, make somebody not suitable for membership. The most obvious ones, and Cliff, please feel free to supplement these if I don't get all of them. If someone is obviously not white, that makes them not suitable for membership in the Asatru Folk Assembly. If someone is a homosexual, that makes them not suitable for the Asatru Folk Assembly. If someone is not Asatru and has no desire to become Asatru, that makes them not acceptable for the Asatru Folk Assembly.
You would think they wouldn't ask, but it happens.
It does. And I'll say this in case it comes up. There are people that just really like us, really like what we're doing, and really want to support us. So they try to become members, even though I've had Christians try to do that. But I've also had a lot of people that are solidly atheists and don't want to reevaluate it, but that really like what they do and want to join to support. And if people want to financially contribute, there's nobody that is not suitable for throwing some ducats our way. If that's what you want to do, we appreciate that. And seriously, if you are a supporter but you don't align with us religiously, there are ways to support us, and we really appreciate it. But fundamentally, we are a church and we are a religion. And if you don't follow our faith, or if you're not earnestly trying to, then we can't in good conscience accept you as members. Other things that wouldn't let you be a member. If you're under 18, if you're not an adult, you can't be a member. If you are incarcerated, you can't apply for membership while you are incarcerated. if we feel that you are a danger to our families, you cannot be a member. If we feel you are a danger to us existentially, you can't be a member. If you are currently in a mixed race relationship, a romantic relationship, you cannot be a member. Those are the things off the top of my head. But there may well be more of those things that come up, but I think those cover most of the bases. Cliff, am I missing anything that you're aware of?
I think the only thing you didn't mention is if you are on that very short list of people who have betrayed the AFA in the past.
So that's under the existential threat of us as a whole. We have so in the circles that we've been in, in doing this right, we have a lot of very passionate people. And unfortunately, we have, so much of this is something that we care so much about. We have a lot of times that people have betrayed the AFA, that people have left us, that we've broken with people, far too many people than I would have liked for us to, or than, I can even really count. But we want all of our people to come home, and our default setting is if you're one of our folk, we want you to come back to the AFA, and through the AFA to come back to your gods. There are very few people that are on a very short list that have actively, through dishonesty and through treacherous means, have tried to damage the AFA as a whole. And those people, if they have that in them and they've broken that trust with us, there are a few people that we can't take the risk of trying to trust again. And that list is very, very small.
And old too. We've gotten pretty good at not having that problem.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of recent people on that list, I'm happy to say. All right. Hail from Don. Hail Odin. Alsheriogothi Matt. Do you think your martial arts training has helped you in dealing with certain situations? I find it has for me. So this isn't fair to the martial art. I think that if I was in martial arts from a much earlier point in my life, that it would have in a lot of ways. No, I don't think it has helped me in situations as of yet. And the reason is because other martial things have helped me in the ways that I like to think martial arts would have helped me in situations. I know that's convoluted, but I just started learning jujitsu, Danzenru jujitsu, about 5 years ago. And it's amazing. I love it. I've learned a lot of really great things with it. I think very highly of it. But most of the confrontation things and physical altercation things and having confidence in my ability to deal with other people, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks, bouncing for 10 years, because I bounced at busy places with very diverse clientele and a lot of different people and a lot of different circumstances. And it taught me a lot about myself. And I think that martial things certainly have helped me in my life, but I didn't start with the martial arts until I was in my late 30s. So I can't really say that that was what helped me in a lot of things. What about you, Cliff? Have you ever taken any martial arts?
I have not. I probably should, though.
You should. I think it's great. And honestly, even though I did it later in life, I'm really glad that I started it. And I'm not going to lie, I go far less than I would like to because I'm getting older and recover slower and feel like I'm getting beat up all the time as far as my joints go. But I'm really glad I'm going to it. Tony, coming in late, tell me honestly, how are you two fine gentlemen doing tonight? Cliff, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'll brag a little bit. Me and Githia Katie, and Matt knows about this, but we dug 55 post holes, 30 inches deep with the proper bell shape, so bigger at the bottom than at the top. And over the weekend, I mixed 2 tons of concrete to fill them, and we put 55 aluminum fence posts up because we're putting in a 500-foot chain link fence. And I'm pretty proud of that. We did that on our own, and that probably saved us about 10 grand. So it's a big deal because we got 3 big dogs, 2 little kids, and a fence is going to be a big addition to our homestead here. It's good stuff. So I'm very happy about it.
Well, Tony, I always give you the same answer, but I think that's because I'm pretty blessed. I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. I'm very excited about the Sigerheim progression. That's something I've been super excited about lately, and we're making good progress. So I'm excited about it. I'm also very excited for, I'm leaving my house here at about 4 a.m. in the morning to get on a plane and start my journey to Feast of the Einherjar in Oklahoma. And I'm always excited to meet some folks that I haven't met before and see my AFA friends and family that I haven't seen, in a little bit. And getting back and seeing those folks is something I'm always very excited to do. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm aware that I'm not going to get much sleep tonight, so I'm a little bit ho-hum about that, but I'm a pretty happy guy. I appreciate you asking and checking in, though. Our next question is, what do you mean a danger existentially? I will gladly answer that, but Cliff, what do you think as far as a reason that somebody can't be a member that qualifies as an existential danger?
I mean, people who are dangerously crazy and want to burn down churches and synagogues and are going to bring bad stuff to the AFA's doorstep, people that, are trying to maliciously operate inside the Asatru Folk Assembly to destructive ends for our mission. If somebody is trying to, if the only reason they're a member is to recruit our members to go do some other thing, we don't want that stuff. People whose presence has the potential to actually damage or destroy the AFA.
Yeah, thinking off the top of my head of 2 examples, and these people are on that short list. We had one guy early on try to create a stratagem to take over leadership of the AFA and to oust its current leadership. And they went through all of these games and really convoluted machinations and building friendships with key people and trying to get certain people in positions to have this coup and to overthrow the AFA's leadership and move it in a radically different direction. They handled it very ham-fistedly, and we figured it out, but that kind of devious behavior isn't acceptable. And that's one of the cases. Another one we ended up, and this is on two fronts that it was existential. This gentleman had a lot of good potential, but was a constant problem as far as behavior goes and couldn't figure out what's appropriate and what's not as far as just being deliberately provocative and in your face to every other group of people and to authorities and to anything else. We tried really hard to work with him for a while and help him realize his best self. But at some point, his behavior became so far out of bounds that it reflected very poorly on the rest of us. And it was done intentionally to seek attention. When confronted about it, he revealed that, though he was a member of leadership, he never really wanted to be part of the AFA at all and was just using us to build a group for himself. And as soon as he did, they were going to break off anyway. So it was no big deal. Now, I think some of that is trying to make himself look good on the way out or whatever. Since then, his group has fallen apart of the few people that he had, and his life is tragic stories since then. But if you're going to say that you take oaths with us dishonestly and you're going to admit to that, then we can't trust you. And if you don't put, especially as a leader in the AFA, if you don't put the needs of the AFA above your own attention seeking, then that's dangerous for us to move forward. And we're trying so hard to build something here that will be around for our children, for our grandchildren, and for our future, and an institution for our folk and for our gods. And we can't risk that on reckless individuals that care more about themselves than about our AFA family. So the next question, I'll let you take this one, Cliff. Freemasons?
We have no prohibition against Freemasons joining the Asatru Folk Assembly.
So I get it. I get the question. I think I know a lot of people in our camp are, sometimes as a hobby, sometimes as more than a hobby, look into a lot of conspiracy things. And, you know, again, just because something is a conspiracy theory doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true. But I think that, you know, truth, the vast majority of American Freemasons in 2022 are guys that like to network with other dudes and drink and do charitable projects. I think that if we were having this discussion in the late 1700s or early 1800s, at that point, we probably would not allow Freemasons into the Asatru Folk Assembly. But I think it's a very different situation now than it was then. And there's a lot of strange overlap and family legacy people involved in Freemasonry that really don't have any kind of clandestine intentions. Looking around, does anybody else have questions for us this evening or anything they would like us to discuss?
It doesn't have to be about truth.
Yeah, it can be about anything you want. I mean, literally, it can be about pretty much anything you want. And I see, you know, there's some populating over in the side now, so we'll hang on because there are a couple of questions. I'm starting to see some of the questions, and another thing that I think would prevent membership if we knew about it is overlap with groups that are not Asatru. One thing that we run into in some of the circles that we're into is people that want to worship Loki or worship any of the forces of chaos because they exist in the same cosmology as our gods. I think some people falsely believe that they're relevant to Asatru. And I think the closest analogy, though this is clearly not all the same, is like Satanists are to Christianity. Like their mythology correlates, but they're on the other team. Those are on two polar opposite teams. And within the cosmology of our ancestors and our Aryan faith, folks that are on the side of chaos are on the other team by definition as those of us who are true to the Aesir. So I think that factors in. We have a question. What about OTO members? They practice Jewish magic having to do with demon summoning. I would think that would be a no for AFA membership. What is your familiarity with the OTO, Cliff?
I've heard of it, but I haven't studied it deeply. But I mean, if you're a member of any other religious organization, then that's going to be something we need to straighten out. I mean, the question could be, what if we catch you going to mass too? It's the same problem. So if someone is a member, is actively participating in another religion that's not Asatru, then that would be disqualifying, and we'll talk to the person about it, find out what's going on. I mean, we're not, in any of these situations, I think that's important to clarify too. It's not like we just, throw people out without talking to them. We're going to try to find out where their head is at. Maybe they were confused, and we're going to try to bring them to Asatru, because our mission is for our folk to be honoring our gods and ancestors. So if it's a recoverable situation, we're going to try to do that every time. But you can't, like I said, I'm not super familiar with OTO, but you can't be a Catholic and Asatru. You can't be a Wiccan and Asatru. And so if you're actively participating in something that's not Asatru religiously, that's a problem that needs to be addressed.
There's a strange overlap in some things, and a lot of people come to Asatru from a left-hand path background or from a satanic background. And when I say satanic, I don't mean an actual worship of the Christian devil per se, but people of a more black magic thing. There's that current, and I see that current much less than I used to in the past. So there may be some overlapping things there that I guess forgive me, but the devil is in the details. And I think that's a thing. But we want people moving in the right direction and examining that. There's a lot of there is some overlap in some of those ideologies, and I think we see that personified by Dr. Stephen Flowers a lot. And again, because I don't, at this point, there would have to be a very serious conversation to judge whether or not Edred Thorson could join the AFA at this point in his life. Because some things are very askew, but I see the overlap there, and that would be something we'd certainly need to talk about and try to figure out. But again, context is everything, and that's really important.
Isn't Edred a Zoroastrian now anyway? So that in and of itself would be a problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering where he's at with that at this point. I haven't heard a lot about his Zoroastrian endeavors as of late, so I don't know if that was a passing phase or just what. But I'm ignorant on where he's at with that.
He should just come home to Asatru.
Yeah, he should have never left that. So, will you get a blue check mark for the AFA Twitter account now? I have no idea what that means. Cliff, do you know what a blue check mark on Twitter indicates, or how?
Yeah, a blue check mark means you're verified, and Elon is going to be charging $8 for blue check marks. I don't think it's worth it at this point. I guess we'll see how it plays out, but I don't know that we'll get a greater audience. I think that the blue check mark is a lot more useful for politicians and reporters and stuff like that, so that when they send instant messages to people, that this is, actually Brett Hume as opposed to someone pretending to be him. And so then you may actually converse with him, but I don't know that it would be helpful to the AFA right now. But $8 isn't a lot if there's any utility that does.
If it's a one-time fee, I mean,
I think it's per month, but still, I don't see what the utility of it would be right now. But I'm not opposed to it if there's a demonstrable reason to get it.
Yeah, I don't see the need in it, but I certainly don't say that we won't do that if it sounds reasonable or advantageous for us to do at some point.
I think it'd be smart to see what the Twitterverse shapes up to be over the next few months. That's very much dynamic right now.
Well, it is, and I certainly, am much happier with the new Twitter regime than the previous one. So we'll see what the future holds. Here's a question that, again, some of the devil's in the details on it. Heathen Man asks, what if a person has been in a mixed race relationship in the past that produced a child, but are no longer in that relationship and have realized the inappropriateness of such a relationship? Eligible? I think that this is the thing. So if a person with those circumstances applied, we would have a very serious discussion behind the scenes if that child were still involved in that person's life. Then no, they would probably not be eligible for membership. But if the child wasn't involved in the person's life, would they be? And there's gray areas. The child's still living. Is the child completely estranged from them? Does the child live at home? All of these things come into question. It would certainly be a very serious issue to contemplate, and it would be very problematic. What are your thoughts on that scenario, Cliff?
Well, there's a couple of different sub scenarios, I think. If we're talking about somebody who, when they were serving overseas, sired some bastards, pardon the language, but that's what it would be, and they've never had any further communication with them, well, that's obviously less than our ideal. I don't think that indiscretion should be sufficient to disqualify someone from being able to participate in their native religion. I mean, the Vikings did this sort of thing too, but they didn't bring them home to their villages. Now, if on the other hand, we have someone who was, in a marriage or a committed relationship and, has a 10-year-old child that they're raising, they need to own that. They need to be a good parent to that child. And I don't think it would be appropriate for us to tell them that their child cannot come to their religious services, but we're not going to have that child at our religious services. And I also wouldn't want someone as a member who would be willing to just ditch their family to come join the AFA. So
yeah, I want to add some context to the question. And again, that's one of those things that there's a lot of details to be worked out with it. The thinking is, and this is counterintuitive to how modern people tend to view religion. The AFA is a community, and we practice our faith as a community. Community is essential to proper practicing of Asatru where that's possible. You could still be Asatru if you lived in a cave and you were stranded there for the rest of your life. That's a thing, but community is what the AFA is about. And it's not so much a question of what's good for the individual. That's certainly important, but it's fundamentally important is what's healthy for the community. When we're all together and we're us, there is a value to that that's inherent. And when you introduce something other, then we're no longer us anymore. We don't have the value of being homogenous. And our thoughts turn to the thing that separates us instead of the thing that brings us together. And that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do at our religious service. Another thing is, if you were to bring around a mixed race child that you agree was produced by a mistake, we wouldn't want our children to see that and think that that's okay or that that's normal, or to be desensitized to that and further by making similar mistakes because they saw that example. So considering what impact it has on the group is a huge defining factor in whether we want to welcome someone into our group. Michael asks, will Sigerheim be in Eastern Tennessee? It will be in Tennessee. Exactly where lines are drawn on what counts as what part of the state, I'm not certain of. And until we're all the way dialed in, we want to, we don't want to narrow it down that much until we purchase it and have it. But in the state of Tennessee, certainly.
I want to just, it's not a question, so it might not come up in the questions, but Ryan says, just look out for Freemason subversion towards universalism. Ryan, I promise we are not going to be subverted towards universalism. We're solidly folkish and always will be.
Well, so that's another thing that would make you not eligible for the Asatru Folk Assembly. If you are a universalist, we do not want you in the Asatru Folk Assembly.
Because you're not Asatru.
Well, and that's the fundamental. There's people with a lot of different worldviews involved in Masonry that don't necessarily buy into those kind of arch values. They're into it as some kind of a club, and that's between them and that organization. But if you don't share our worldview, then you can't be part of the AFA. And so a lot of the Masons that you are thinking about, the super evil Masons that brought down, all the good things in European society, those people wouldn't be welcome in the AFA either. So Nick asks, what are you looking forward to the most at Feast of the Iron Yar in Oklahoma? There's a lot of things. I think it's going to be a really special event. Like I said, I'm going to meet a lot of people that I haven't met before. I'm going to spend time with people that I genuinely enjoy their company. This is what right now I'm looking most forward to because I think it'll be fun. I like road trips. I'm flying into Dallas, and one of our apprentice folk builders, Justin Day, is going to drive myself and Witan Brandy Callahan up to the event in Oklahoma. So I'm looking forward to the car ride with them. I haven't met him yet, so I'm looking forward to getting to know him a little bit and hanging out with Brandy, and honestly stopping and eating road snacks and drinking absurd amounts of energy drinks and eating candy. That's probably what I'm excited about doing tomorrow. I will celebrate the virtue of truth by just putting that out there. Fun fact, I try really hard to count my macros and stay on a reasonable macro diet plan while I'm here at home. But I use AFA Adventures as an excuse to eat off the reservation and indulge my cravings on some stuff. So I do look forward to that. That's always a fun part. Vril Vanier, are there valid reasons for the gods to be untruthful to us, comforting lie / keeping us safe from harm? Or would they rather be bluntly truthful and have us face the problem head on? It's a really interesting question. Cliff, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I don't know the minds of our gods, so I'm going to have to just, I guess, say yes. But as far as, what they would prefer or motives, I think that would take a level of hubris for me to assume that I could speak for them in that way.
So I am very proud of you, Cliff, that you answered that way. I want everyone in AFA leadership to answer that way because piety dictates the gods can make rules for us. We don't make rules for the gods. I'm not sitting where they sit. I don't know what they know. And I don't have the authority or the appropriateness to dictate the bounds of what our gods can and can't do or should and shouldn't do. I think it would be impious to impose that upon them. Now, what I will say is, in my understanding, our gods certainly want to encourage truth and facing truth courageously. That seems to be something that is fundamental. And they want us to rise to circumstances with a certain amount of courage and stoicism, even when we know that an outcome isn't what we want. So I think that the gods certainly encourage truth amongst us and want us to be able to respond. If we are presented with an easy hand and comforting lies, it takes away our opportunity to act with virtue, to act with any of several of our noble virtues, with perseverance and pushing through adversity, with courage by being afraid of things and still acting. The more the gods are dishonest to us, the more we're unable to live up to those standards that they want us to have. So I think that generally speaking, no, the gods don't want to function out of dishonesty to us. But again, I would not presume to tell the gods what to do or not to do.
And I think if we look at our lore, the gods are certainly capable of deceit. They have employed it against Jotuns on numerous occasions to their own benefit. I think that what we think they want for us, and what we think their agenda is, are not always in alignment with what's real. When we talk about praying and asking for things from the gods, this comes up sometimes in that if you are, I said in the previous show that I was on, I think that when I'm asking for something for myself, that I go to my ancestors, because I think that they have a much more direct concern about my individual well-being and that of my immediate family than that say Odin or Thor would, because Odin's busy worrying about the universe and all of our folk with a capital F, and all of the Aesir and Ragnarok and all of these other, he's got a pretty busy plate. And, whether or not I get a raise, or, whether or not the car makes it home, or some of these smaller things that people are, inclined to, petition our gods for, I don't think that it even the details like that necessarily come into their much grander plans. And if it does, it's not in a way that I would understand. If somehow my car breaking down delays Ragnarok, then I guess that's what's going to happen, but I probably will never know.
Okay, so I'm seeing a conversation going on the side, and I want to chime in on it. And forgive me if this has already been addressed. We have somebody asking how a non-member could get vouched for by a member so that they could attend an event. The best thing for you to do is to reach out to the folk builder nearest you. And this is a good time to plug our Hoff District websites. Each of these websites has a contact page with folk builders, and it says in their description what state they're in. So depending on where you live, these are the places that you would go to. The addresses are up right now. Those of you listening on a podcast later, it's odinshof.org, thorshof.com, baldershof.org, and njordshof.org. All of those are spelled in the English spelling with the English characters, because the addresses didn't support the Icelandic characters. Anyways, yeah, you want to reach out to a folk builder there and talk to them, and they can try to get that squared away. And it doesn't have to be some huge, concern, but we do want to check in with you and have that conversation. All of those people would love to talk to you. It's literally what they signed up to do. So please do not hesitate and reach out to them. If you have questions on, which one of those districts you happen to find yourself in, the answers are on the homepage to those places, but you ask them in the side, we'll gladly tell you to. So this question from Don Ricardo. So, thoughts on the 9 noble virtues? Cliff, do you have thoughts on the 9 noble virtues?
They're great. I mean, we've talked about truth an awful lot, so I think that one's covered. I mean, my thoughts on the 9 noble virtues overall is, they are a distillation of right behavior from the Eddas and the sagas. Sometimes you'll hear people criticize, well, those aren't in the lore. It's like, well, yes, they are. All of the lore is about these virtues. And I think that, they're not commandments, but they are ideals that we should strive to.
So, yeah, I have thoughts on them, certainly. They're great, and I wouldn't be doing this series of discussions if I didn't think they were. We absolutely agree on those in the Asatru Folk Assembly, with the added 10th virtue of victory. 9 noble virtues, I just want to give a hail to Stubba and Hoskold of the Odinic Rite. John Ewell and John Gibbs Bailey, they are the founding fathers of the 9 noble virtues as we have them today. It's wrong-headed to criticize them because that list wasn't carved into a runestone 1,000 years ago. Foundational practitioners of Asatru in modern times came up with that list to define core principles for us to live by and to send that into the future. And it's stood the test of time. It's not thousands of years old, but in 1,000 years it will be. As it is now, it's 50 years old or more. But yeah, it was a great step forward by those gentlemen, and we honor them for that, and we are very much believers in those virtues within the Asatru Folk Assembly. We have a donation from Lawrence Forbes, 10 Canadian dollars. Thank you. We always appreciate it. He's a frequent contributor to the program. Good evening, gents. It's so refreshing to hear grounded men like yourselves speaking up unashamedly for our gods and for our folk. A huge thank you. Blessed be. Well, you are very welcome. We appreciate you saying so. And like I say, we really appreciate your continued support.
Yeah, thanks.
Got a question from Finn Wraith. What gods are part of the forces of chaos? Cliff, you want to start on that?
Sure. I wouldn't call them gods. They're spiritual entities, but I mean the primary ones would be Loki, Fenrir, Jormungandr, Hela. To a point, that's a more complicated topic, but as a daughter of Loki, I think she would be included in that. The Thursar, the fire giants and the ice giants, mostly. There's some caveats there too. But that's what we're talking about. I'm assuming your question is what entities were we referring to earlier when Ashir-Gothi Matt was talking about people who would worship the forces of chaos. Basically, any entity that is in opposition to the order that the Aesir established.
Yeah, so everything Cliff said, but the principle, the context is this. Some people, when people are new to our faith, oftentimes they assume that anyone who identifies with the cosmology as presented in ancient European lore is necessarily practicing Asatru. And also some people, and a lot of people, because it's become the default answer to many folks, repeat this without thinking about it, that Asatru means belief in the Aesir. And it doesn't. It means loyalty to, it means troth with the Aesir. We're talking about truth today. True is part of Asatru. It is part of the combined word, and it means being true to or loyal to the Aesir. The Havamal tells us that, if to be loyal to someone is to stand with them against their foes. So the Aesir are forces of order, and the entities that are opposed to them, we stand with the Aesir in opposing and combating. And that certainly includes Loki. That's probably the big one people are familiar with. But also any of those forces that line up on the other team at Ragnarok, obviously those are forces that are in opposition to us. And so those would be the entities we're talking about. And I think that answers the question. I'm also looking over on the side, and we're having the ongoing thing about folks who want to maybe come to the event. And I invited folks, still seriously, there is time. Do reach out to your folk builder and see about perhaps attending the Feast of the Einherjar event. People that you want to talk to, fgordon@runestone.org, smccurdy@runestone.org. That's SMCCURDY, or cevans@runestone.org. Those are our three folk builders who are in Oklahoma, and they would be really happy to help. As Nick mentioned on the side, they may well be busy prepping for the event, but they should be able to still respond to their emails and have that conversation. And if you're able to, that would be great to meet you and get to see you there. Ray says, what about scenarios, or no, I'm sorry, I apologize, I can't read, I promise. What about seniors who are on a fixed income that still want to be part of the AFA but can't afford to be a member due to the cost of gas and membership fees? Cliff, go ahead and take this one.
Well, that's what our Hoftaler program is for. We have the way we prefer, in fact, that people contribute to the Asatru Folk Assembly is through Hoftaler, which means Hof tax, Hof toll, and it's essentially a tithe. We only ask 1% or more, but 1% is the minimum of somebody's income. And somebody on a fixed income is under all but the most extreme circumstances able to do that. If anybody can afford 1% in real terms, but that would be the solution for that. We have also had that program leveraged for our international members. We have members in South Africa who would make even the most limited income in America look luxurious. And the Hoftaler program works great for them as well, because 1% of what do they have there, kroner? But 1% of whatever it is, if you make $1 per year, you can give us a penny. But nobody actually makes $1 per year. We want people to be honest about their actual ability to contribute.
So kroner is Denmark or perhaps some other Scandinavian countries. The currency in South Africa is the rand. And I'm kind of curious what the root of that is. So our value tonight is truth. So I'm just going to be true on this. This excludes international members because I don't pretend to know the exchange rate in a lot of these different places. In America, there's no one that cannot afford the $10 benefactor monthly fee. There's no one that can't afford $10 It's a pack of cigarettes. It's a value meal at McDonald's. It's that in the course of an entire month. Literal homeless people that are on the corner asking for change can spend $10 a month. Now, the question comes, is the AFA worth $10 a month to you? And unfortunately, many people don't feel that it's worth that. And though that makes me sad, that's truth. But Cliff's answer is the best answer, and it is something that has made a huge difference for us. And fundamentally, it meets our values in a really good way because we rise and we fall together. We succeed together or we struggle together. The Hoftoller is a minimum of 1% of a person or a household's income. When you're doing well, if that income is massive, then we all benefit and get a big donation out of that. If the income is very small, then we get a very small donation out of it. But what it does mean is that someone is committed to spending at least 1% of that income on the AFA and on what we're doing together. And that means a lot. So yeah, like on whatever, certainly internationally, but the scenarios you mentioned, the fixed income seniors, there's no part of the AFA that wants to, damage old people by taking their last penny on something. But I think 1% is a very reasonable situation. And if there was some strange outlying reason that that's not the case, then those people should reach out to us individually and we can figure something out. But when people suggest that they can't afford $10 a month, it's hard for me to truly believe that with just the cost of pretty much anything these days. $10 a month is not a lot to donate to your church and to your gods. But it's an issue of, is it worth it to you or not? And I hope that it is.
Yeah, plenty of seniors on fixed incomes are giving their 10% to their Baptist and Christian churches. So it's not an unreasonable thing for us to ask.
No, not at all. Finn Wraith, is it okay to be a member of a political party? Absolutely it is. There may be some misunderstanding or confusion out there. The AFA doesn't suggest that our members need to not participate in politics or in the world and its governance. Be active. Let your faith determine your politics as opposed to the other way around. But yeah, we would encourage people to be politically active in legal and appropriate ways, in any way that they feel our faith informs them to act politically. And I'm glad you asked the question. I know that there's all kind of different ideas about politics. Some people, depending on their background, think that politics equals street brawling, and it doesn't. That's not what politics, always is. Politics is very often working at polling places and helping with candidates that you support, and is very much in line with our values as Americans, with our values in the West. So if you feel motivated by your sincere Asatru values to participate politically in a political party that you think supports those things and is good for our folk, then by all means participate in that. Danny says, I've noticed limited apologetics type content to defend and contend for the truth of the Asatru faith from a scientific or philosophical perspective, as opposed to purely spiritual one. Is that something that you see the AFA ever getting involved with, or are those types of debates counterproductive? What are your thoughts, Cliff?
Rereading the question just for a moment.
No worries.
So I don't know that there's a harm in going through a scientific exercise or a philosophical exercise, and applying it to our faith, Asatru. But I mean, by definition, because Asatru is a faith, it doesn't, require scientific or philosophical proof. I don't know that the AFA itself would get involved in those kind of things. Although the show that you were on recently, Matt, was kind of like that, where you had the conversation with the polite atheist gentleman who challenged you on truth, actually.
So, yes and yes. I think that the AFA is always open to having conversations, and because we believe very strongly in our faith, having that discussion and trying to I think that the term defend and contend goes to something here. I think that having a dialogue and expressing truth to people and telling them about our faith and our gods is a very valuable thing. I think discussing their disagreements with that, or their reservations they might have, or questions they might have, I think is a valid thing. I think that debates are also counterproductive because it depends on what the point is. If the point is to impress a judge that through your argumentation, one of those things becomes true or not, I think it's a little bit wrongheaded. Truth exists whether you score points in a debate environment or whether you don't. That was kind of important to me on the broadcast that Cliff talked about. Tom Jump, and I'm trying to remember the name of his podcast, but or his very, very similar to this, but he had actual debates on there with different theologians, and it was about the argument less than about coming to truth and about winning over your opponent rather than the truth of it. And debate is valuable and really cool. I was on my high school Lincoln Douglas debate. I was on my high school debate team, and I competed in Lincoln Douglas debate. I went to nationals one year, and I think debate is great. But the truth of that is, when you debate in high school or at a college level, you have to take both sides of an issue, and randomly they get drawn, and you have to take the side and convincingly debate on it. It's about winning over your opponent much more than it's about the discovery of truth oftentimes. So I think arguing with people that don't really want to be convinced in the hope that you can score points is fruitless, unless representing Asatru to the audience may benefit somebody who's listening. So I think all of the details in that matter, but I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time trying to defend or justify our faith. We don't have to defend or justify our faith. We need to practice our faith and be proud of it. And the fruit of that will bear more results than argumentation, I think. Filthy Heathen. Sorry if this has been asked, came in late to the stream. Is truth absolute, or can truth evolve? What do you think, Cliff?
Truth is absolute. Our understanding of truth evolves, or lack of understanding, which is probably more accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that our ways of describing truth hopefully trend closer and closer to perfection. I think there's ways to understand truth generally, and as we evolve in our understanding, to be able to narrow down the specific depth and breadth of those truths in different ways. But truth is absolute and it's objective. Truth exists whether we can articulate it or understand it correctly or not. Something is either true or it's not. Faceless One. got a custom license plate that reads Asatru. Thoughts? Cliff, what are your thoughts on that?
That's cool.
I have no great profound thoughts on that, other than we have a Minnesota license plate at Odenshoff that also has Asatru on it. One of our former members had that license plate. Jackson asks, what is the AFA's position on recreational marijuana use? The AFA has no position on recreational marijuana use. The AFA's position generally is conform to the laws of where you're at, and certainly conform to those laws when you're at an AFA event where you're at. If you're living in a place where that's legal, then we have no objection to that. We have no moral objection to the use of marijuana as the AFA. As far as we're concerned, it's a person's personal choice. And yeah, what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on the marijuana issue, Cliff?
Sure. I mean, everything that you said. I mean, this is true for pretty much anything, but don't do things that are going to cause harm to yourself or to your loved ones. So if if it's not legal where you are, or if you have to interact with particularly shady people to do that, then it's probably unwise to do it. But like having a beer or having a whiskey or any other number of things that grown-ups can decide to do, it's not objectionable from a moral standpoint. Whether I apply this to when we're talking about our holy symbols a lot, but I suppose it can be true for food or alcohol or tobacco or marijuana. You can judge by whether you're using something wisely or not by the results that you see in the real world. So, if you find yourself highly unmotivated, then maybe you should, put the joint down and go for a run or read a book or something like that. But in and of itself, it's a plant.
And I'll throw this out there. There's other uses for marijuana besides getting high. I've seen a lot of very, very beneficial effects on people with chronic pain issues and people with some various mental traumas. There's a lot of different reasons people might use marijuana.
I'll share that when I was a young man, I used marijuana pretty regularly, and I wish that I hadn't, because I wasted a lot of time and money. Not that I don't wish that I never did it, but I wish that I hadn't, gotten into like pop culture the way that I did. It made me take a longer time to grow into the man that I could be, because it distracted me from other things I could have been doing.
I have a pretty high tolerance for most things. And, when I was younger, there's a big pot culture thing in Alaska, and everybody would try to, or I say everybody, quite a few people would try to get me to try this pot, or no, you just didn't have the right stuff. And I could never get it to do anything to me, except for it made me really hungry one time. I say that, but recently, a few years back, somebody had a marijuana vape pen that I try to hit off of, and man, one inhale of that, it didn't affect my brain, but it affected my body to where I couldn't move. I was shocked at how potent that had gotten. Just as a random side note, I suppose.
Science.
So Lawrence Forbes is back with another 10 Canadian dollars. Thank you so much. We always appreciate it. I've been chatting up a gal at a restaurant lately, and we got around to discussing beliefs. She said she was pagan, to which I replied, so am I. She added, I don't like the racist pagan groups, though. At some point, I'll share the AFA, but not waste too much time if she turns out to be too anti-white. Well, I'm glad that she's talking to you. I hope that works out well for you. It seems to anybody who front loads with the anti-racist stuff, I think that's a pretty good indication that that might not work out the way that you would like. But I do wish you the best with it. Finn Wraith asks, are people who follow Hel not allowed in the AFA? She is a daughter of Loki, but I do not think she ever seems to really take a side at Ragnarok, at least from what I remember. I could be wrong. So this is an issue that even internally in the AFA gets talked a lot about. No, you're being a follower of Hel would not make you disallowed from joining the AFA. But we would be curious as to your thoughts on that. Just as a random aside on that, Sleipnir, Odin's horse, is also a child of Loki, and we're not opposed to Sleipnir. In fact, it's on the banner behind me. But that's certainly a gray area within our faith. One thing that I will say about Hela is the courtesy that she showed Balder while Balder was in her realm. That was a kind of an interesting note to me, that she showed respect and treated him, as a prince of the gods while he was there. And I think that speaks to a certain amount of hospitality. But again, that's a gray area that I know has some discomfort. But no, that alone would not preclude you from being a member of the Asatru Folk Center.
I think most of us are going to rest with Hela in Hel when we pass away. That's the, and our ancestors will be there. That's where, I think most of us will go. Valhalla is for very few. Other halls are for very few. Hela is the embodiment of death, right? So she is something that should be respected. But it's not something that you want to worship. If it really would depend on what someone means by following Hel to me. If it's some kind of death cult thing that they're doing, then I would take issue with that. If it is, a matter of paying proper respects, that's another thing altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, with so many things, the details really, really do matter on that. Githya Anna asks, could you explain why it's important to meet or have non-members vouched for before they attend events? So quite frankly, there's a couple of things. The obvious thing that comes to mind is our events we bring our families to, and we don't want anyone that's dangerous there. It's a high trust environment. We certainly don't want anyone to do anything criminal or dangerous there. Very specifically, we don't want child molesters there. We don't want people that we're uncomfortable around our kids there. We're not going to know everything perfectly, and especially, when we're just getting to know somebody a little bit, but we want to do the due diligence in at least, asking some questions and getting to know a few things first. But something I don't think we mention often enough, we don't want some freak show showing up. We don't want somebody who is obviously not in the right spot that's going to make everyone uncomfortable and and be uncomfortable because they're not in the right place. So we want to know a little bit about who they are, what their worldview is, how they come to things. One of the best things about our events is we can experience truth. People don't have to hide who they are or how they think, what they say for fear of triggering somebody who's does not share our worldview. So yeah, we don't want some freak show to show up that shouldn't be there, or just somebody who's under a misconception about what we're about. So it's important to have those initial conversations and do a little bit of due diligence of making sure that the person there is not a problem. And the vouching for matters as well. If somebody vouches for them, they're responsible for that person's behavior, and we have somebody to call on to help manage that if anything were to become a problem. But those are some of my thoughts on it. Cliff, do you have anything to add on why we would want somebody to be a non-member to be vouched for or met in person first?
Yeah, I mean, so that we can set proper expectations for them, that they have an idea of what the AFA is, and that they're approaching it, either with a sincere curiosity about what we do, or, as a respectful observer. For example, if somebody wanted to bring their devoutly Christian mom who wants to see what this Asatru thing that their son has gotten into is, we are okay with that, provided that she understands that we're, going to be breaking some of her dear commandments, and that she's respectful as an observer and not participating in rituals. But that, yeah, of course, you can come see what your son's doing. We're not a cult, so we're not going to hide what we're doing from you. And for someone who, maybe isn't sure if they're Asatru or not, maybe they really like I was like this when I first got involved. I liked the idea of being Asatru. I believed in believing in the gods, but I hadn't quite gotten to it being an article of faith for me yet. And how else are you supposed to give someone the opportunity to have that experience if they can't come? But we want to make sure they're serious and respectful.
Yeah, there's any number of reasons that we would want to steer somebody away from attending events, or that, maybe we'd be very excited about having them at an event and having them get to experience that and want to become a member. Cliff's point about family members is always something really special. Whenever somebody is able to bring a member of their family, especially like a parent or an aunt or an uncle or something in, that's really a special thing. And I don't know, that's just something really neat to see. So I hope more of those things happen. Yeah, don't let it scare you off, but you do need to reach out to a folk builder and feel it out. And hopefully it'll work out and we can see you at something, and or you find out it's not where you want to be and you're not ready yet.
I appreciate when families check us out too, because they're watching out for their own. Before they meet us, they don't have any reason to trust that we have their son or daughter's best interest at heart. So coming and checking us out in person, I take as a compliment, honestly.
Well, I do too, because I think it means that they're willing to take us seriously. If we were completely insignificant and it was some silly hobby, it wouldn't be such a big deal. Them realizing that it has gravity towards their family member, that is a testament to that we're doing something serious, and that means a lot to me as well. Owl of Omens says, "Hi all, hail the AFA. What is your favorite virtue of the 9 noble virtues?" Cliff, what is your favorite of the 9 noble virtues?
Oh, it's got to be truth, because my peers selected me to be here tonight. Apparently, I'm good at it. I don't know, for better or worse. Both, probably.
Cliff is dropping truth bombs, like when he talked about if you go overseas and you create some bastards and you leave them there. Yeah, Cliff is known for his truth. I mean, they're all amazing things. I would have to say that my favorite of the original 9 is courage. I think courage is so very fundamental. It's something that, yeah, I would have to say courage. Ali asks, what is the biggest truth one can tell or show someone to bring them home? It's a good question. Cliff, what do you think the biggest truth one can tell or show somebody that would bring them home to Asatru is?
Asatru is your birthright. Your ancestors literally are still alive in your blood, in your DNA, And those ancestors are a physical link back to our most ancient ancestors, the gods and goddesses.
So you said tell or show, and this is critical here because I don't think that telling, by all means, tell them this, but I think that showing is the only way this really works. The gods are real and listening. That doesn't mean much when you say it to somebody who's uninitiated and that doesn't have an experience, but if you can show it to them, it means everything. I've said that on here, but one of the most profound experiences as a Gothi is when you are involved in a ritual or you perform a ritual and it becomes real to someone. And there's a lot of people who go into rituals or Asatru and maybe have been involved for a long time, and they think it's real. They believe that it's real. They want very much for it to be real, but something happens when it is real for them. And you see it in their eyes when all of a sudden something metaphysical, something transcendent happens and they experience it. And you can't go back from that. Once you know that it's real, it's real and you can't unknow it. So showing somebody the reality of our gods listening and interacting in a ritual way, I think that is the most effective thing to bring them home if you can facilitate that happening. And that's not just something that you can show them. It's something the gods have to show them. I mean, I think that I do a good job in bloat. I feel like I do a good job in it, but if the gods don't respond well, or if the gods don't feel that I do a good job with it, then I can't show that to them. So, the gods certainly have to cooperate in order for that to be shown, but being a part of that showing is a very special thing if you can do it. So Shannon asks, how do I send a donation? Any way you want. That is the best answer. Any way you would like. Do we have a link for the mailing address for somebody to send a check or money order donation? We'll see if Nick can throw that up. Think he will at some point here. You can certainly do it that way. The easiest and best way is probably to go to our website, www.runestone.org. Yeah, this is about the will, but it also has the P.O. box where you would send that donation to. So if you go to runestone.org, there's a donate link to any number of projects you want, or if you just want to donate it to the AFA in general for us to use at our discretion, the general fund is where it would go. Please feel free to donate to any of those projects there that we have ongoing. That's the best way to donate. You are also welcome to donate by going to Entropy and throwing us dollars here on the stream. If you go to Entropy, you'll be able to do that. And again, Nick will put that link up for us. But thank you for asking, and thank you for everyone who donates and has donated for us. It means a lot. Thank you so much. All right, we are 2 hours in and we're starting to wind down here. If you guys have last questions you want to throw at us, please do. All right, so we have not a question, but Nick would like my thoughts on it. Ryan O'Ryan Wodenson says, Thulian perspective on BitChute said Hela is not Loki's child, that is a Snorri thing. I think that's a possibility too. So that sounds like it is a Norrena Society thing or idea.
It's Varg.
Oh, that's him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then it is, and that's what that is. I don't think that's based on very much, and that's certainly not the position we hold in the Asatru Folk Assembly. There's an awful lot of hostility out there from certain circles and in the Norena Society specifically towards Snorri. Snorri did us a great service by recording our lore in the way that he did, in a way that's been translated or transmitted down to us. And we have no reason to think that Hela is not the daughter of Loki, as the lore that's handed down to us certainly tells us. What are your thoughts, Cliff?
Even if she's not the daughter of Loki, all the stuff I said about death still applies. So it doesn't really, I don't think it would change our approach to her.
Yeah, I don't think it would fundamentally change what we do in the AFA, but no, we do believe that she is a child of Loki. Yeah, I don't. Truth on that is that the large deviations that the Norena Society folks do towards our faith are things that we typically don't support, and that's one of them. I'm curious if Svan was here, he would have a 45-minute presentation answering that question. That would be amazing and full of lore chunks, because that's what he specializes in. But
we all will get to that eventually, right?
You know, I think that we each have that on things that are our go-tos. That's just something that the lore nitpicking is something he's particularly skilled at. Do we have any more questions for either myself or Cliff this evening, guys?
While we're waiting for him to roll in, I want to plug a couple of things. If you're in Pennsylvania, myself and Githia Katie Erickson will be in Gettysburg on Saturday. Githia Katie will be doing a Feast of the Einherjar on the Gettysburg battlefield, where many of our ancestors fell, and I'm sure some Einherjar have their blood in that land. So if you're in Pennsylvania or Maryland or willing to travel to Gettysburg from farther than that, reach out to us, and we'd love to have you there. Also, if you are in upstate New York or Ontario, Canada, in 2 weekends, we will be meeting at Niagara Falls. Very excited about that because we haven't been able to really do much of anything in Canada, but they opened up recently. So if you're in Canada or can travel to Canada, let me know and we'll meet up with you there. We're doing actually the New York side on one day and the Ontario side on another. So if you can't cross that border, doesn't matter. We'll let you know which day we'll be where.
So that's really exciting. I think it will be really nice for some of us to be, and I say us, I won't be there, but for you guys to get to interact with our Canadian members for silly things. We've been prevented from doing that for a long time. And it's really nice that that's changing. And the idea of the Einherjar celebration at the battlefield is really special. I encourage anybody who can to try to be part of that. That sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm envious of folks that are able to attend that. So I think we're gonna call it a night. I do see one more question over on the side. What are our thoughts on Varg? Cliff, what are your thoughts on Varg?
They're mixed. I mean, most people are probably familiar with his troubled history, and that stuff I don't approve of. But I knew Thulian Perspective was Varg because I've followed some of his YouTube videos early on when I was interested in Asatru. So, he has an interesting perspective on things. He's not a stupid person. I just don't always agree with some of his assertions. Sometimes I Not sure if they're founded in anything other than his own brainstorming, which doesn't mean that they're wrong. Just I mean, he's a guy out there who's thinking about our gods, and that's a start. I think he should join the AFA.
So I had misheard Cliff, and I thought he said Thulian Perspective was Mark, as in Mark Purrier of the Norena Society. So I have no idea if that's their stance on Hela. I still think it is, but disregard what I said in that regard towards the Norena guys. That's not fair. Yeah, I don't hate Varg as a person, but I don't see any value to Varg as a talking head in the spheres involving Asatru at all. I think his ideas are bad. I don't think he is stupid, but I don't think that he has sincere faith and belief in the existence of our gods as persons. I don't think that his motivation is worship. I think that his motivation is to come up with interesting and unique theories about stuff and to try to have those things make sense to him and fit his placenta ideology on stuff. But yeah, what I don't like is that people do look to Varg, and by listening to Varg can get a misunderstanding about Asatru, about our gods, and about our faith. And in that sense, I think that's destructive. I'm not pro any source out there that's going to make it harder for people to come home to Asatru and be involved. And yeah, I think most of Varg's ideas that I end up hearing or coming in contact with are ridiculous and not of merit. I think he's very intelligent. I think he's probably too intelligent for his own good, unfortunately. Sometimes the most intelligent people are more entertained by their own intelligence than by true things that might be simple and have been said already. One thing that I think motivates a lot of folks, and whether they admit it or not, is they have to be they have this preference for some obscure thing they can add to the debate. So if we have a wealth of understanding and tradition over here, but they find one contrary thing that they can base some idea around, they prioritize their one strange outlying thing because it's theirs and they can feel special or important because of it. And when that guides folks, I think it's very detrimental to getting a real understanding of our faith. I hear people over there talking about how people like his music. His music may be a good thing. It's just not my style of music. It's not something I listen to. I have no opinion on him as a musical artist. And again, it's cool that he's got a family, he's raising his kids, and he's doing cool stuff. That's great. But I don't find his contributions to Asatru to be beneficial. And with that, I think that's what we've got tonight. Thank you guys so much for contributing. Thank you for all of the questions, some really deep and well thought out questions tonight. And yeah, thank you very much, Cliff, for joining us. And thank you for being the example of truth amongst AFA leadership. We all really admire you for that.
Psych. Nah, just kidding. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we look forward to next time you can join us. We'll call it a night, guys. I'm going to try to get a little bit of sleep before I head to the airport. Until next time, hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember that victory never sleeps.